Hello, and thank you for joining me for a reading from Freckles and Friends, True Stories of Garden Wildlife for World Book Day. The stories are intended to be for children aged 7 to 11 and help to inspire attention and a kindness to wildlife in accessible places like gardens. This video was filmed live in 2020, and I'm transferring the old recordings onto this channel in order to keep the archive. It includes stories of Freckles the robin and a lobster in a moth trap fighting a wren. It was quite a culture shock to start doing videos. All of us were a bit bamboozled, but yeah, I'm still bamboozled. Here we go. Many thanks.
Freckles, of course, was a young robin with a mind of his own. Mrs. Freckles was his companion that he acquired, fell in love with 2 weeks out of the nest. And Spike was an elderly female tortoiseshell cat whose days of catching birds were past, but who really didn't like other cats, so she would regularly see them off. Freckles. It was a warm and sunny day, and Simon and Amanda were sitting at the table in the garden finishing off the last crumbs of their bread and cheese lunch. Each took a sip of their coffee, setting it down gently and slowly as they enjoyed the sunshine. Plop! A muddy brown shadow appeared on the table next to Amanda, hopping a little closer but not too close. It was a bird, but it had funny markings. It had the shape of a robin, the behaviour of a robin, but no breast, just freckles. Simon cleared up the question of what it was very quickly by saying, "It's a young robin." Their new friend then did what all children do and started checking around for food. There may have been some small insects in the pattern of the table, but there were crumbs of bread and cheese too, and he seemed to like both. Simon and Amanda thought he might like some of the bird seed that they had carried on using to feed the birds after the end of spring. Freckles seemed to agree and pecked happily at the offering, jumping down to tidy up what had fallen through the table when he had finished. As rapidly as he had arrived, suddenly he had gone. Simon and Amanda sat and eventually picked up their rather chilly coffees and finished them, and then went indoors to get on with the day. For the following days the sun shone, and Freckles took to joining Simon and Amanda as they had their lunch. Freckles again enjoyed eating the seeds that they had put down for him. One day, soon after Freckles first turned up and he had got used to having the seeds, while Simon and Amanda had their bread and cheese with salad, he didn't turn up as he usually had been doing. The old cat from 2 doors up, Spike, was in her usual spot, hidden in a rose bush. They missed Freckles. Then they realised that they could hear a sound in the little oak tree. It was like a bird singing, but really quietly. They searched the branches with their eyes for about 20 minutes as they chomped on their lunch. To their surprise and delight, they suddenly saw him, perched on a stumpy bit of branch, throat wobbling and beak aloft. His freckles wobbled with his throat. The song he was singing was one they had never heard before, and it was really beautiful, or it sounded as if it would be if they could hear it properly. Simon and Amanda sat as if under a spell until Freckles had finished, after which he sort of shrugged his shoulders and hopped off to go to the table in the raspberries where they had been putting his lunchtime food. After this, most lunchtimes they enjoyed this serenade, after which sometimes he would disappear off, sometimes he would eat, and sometimes, pretty silly boy, he would test Spike to make sure she was really safe. When a glow came into Spike's eyes, as she remembered she once wasn't safe for birds, he would fly back up to the stumpy branch he had taken as his place to sit. One day he brought a little friend with him to share the seeds. She was also freckled, but much more wary of Simon and Amanda. She was not obviously pretty, but he had found his girlfriend really young. After this, she would sit on afar as he did his singing practice, and then they would take turns at the seed table. She never tried to test Spike. As they grew older and the summer passed into autumn, Freckles started to beat up any robins who came near. He didn't care if they were adults or others of his own age. They still got the sharp tip of his beak. He did this to them all, apart from his girlfriend, to whom he remained devoted. Then suddenly they disappeared. Both of them were gone. No more of that beautiful singing on the edge of sound. No more parading in front of Spike's nose. For a few weeks, Simon and Amanda were really worried that both robins had been hurt or worse. They still had robins in the garden, but they behaved totally differently. Then they thought maybe the two birds had flown to France on a sort of bird exchange, and Simon and Amanda had French robins. This made sense. French robins don't come and help to dig the garden in the way British robins do, as they spend their lives away from humans. Simon and Amanda decided to wait until the spring and see what happened. In the spring, the daffodils came out, and so did the primroses. Small green buds started to unfurl on the bushes, and suddenly, one day, they heard a familiar song. But this wasn't all quiet and peaceful. This was rich, melodic, and very, very loud. Freckles was back, and he made sure that everybody knew it. But Freckles had also grown up. He was a family man now. He and his girlfriend had set up nests together, and he had responsibilities. No longer did he have time to sit around practicing his song. He had young beaks to feed. They raised 4 babies. Simon and Amanda reckoned once the babies had started to flit around, but they weren't allowed to sit on Freckles' branch. In many ways it was sad not to be sharing his life anymore, but in others it was wonderful to see such a life unfold, in detail they could never have expected to see. Young Freckles shared his world with them. Was it for seed, for security, or just enjoying their company? Nobody can know, but Simon and Amanda are grateful. It's worth mentioning the fact that when we describe the little oak tree, what we're describing is a very little oak tree, and it grew next to the table where we were having our lunch. And if I had stood and looked at Freckles, he would have been about 3 feet away and looked straight into my eyes. That is the height of the branch. He was that close. It was that special. Next story. Wrens, robins and hornets. For his birthday one year, Simon was given a moth trap. This was a wooden box with a strong light bulb and some perspex windows. under the perspex, he would place old egg cartons that he had torn into two. At night, the strong light shines out from a moth trap and attracts moths, which some people think that the light is the moon. Moths aren't very popular in some households, but actually there are many that are as beautiful as butterflies. Some look more like armoured tanks, but most need to be looked at carefully to see how different they are to each other. Simon spent a lot of time doing this in the mornings. Moths are very popular with birds and bats, as well as spiders, wasps and hornets, because they all like to eat them. After Simon started to use the moth trap, once they all got the idea that the moth trap meant a well-balanced breakfast, it became a bit of a battle between them for Simon to see the moths before they were eaten. This was not the idea behind the moth trap. It was for making lists of names of moths seen and letting the moths go free. Simon grumbled a lot. Then one day a wren made things even worse. Instead of picking up the moths from the grass around the trap, because he was small, he jumped into the space between the perspex windows and started noshing on the big moths hiding in the egg cartons. Simon let out a deep wail of frustration. The wren was having a lovely time, and as the days went on, he became a bit of a maniac. All that food was like bright-coloured sweets to human children. He started to fling the egg cartons around inside the trap. Something had to be done soon. Amanda thought about it a bit. She thought about the problem and how it needed to be a simple solution. Something was needed to stop the wren from getting into the moth trap, but still let the moths go inside. There was the possibility of getting up at dawn and waving an umbrella or something at it, but that in the summer is very, very early, and the wren would win every time. Then she joked, "What we need is a clockwork toy that starts up when the wren goes in, enough to frighten it back out, but not enough to hurt it." Simon didn't laugh. He thought it was a good plan. The next time Amanda was at the shops, she went into a toy shop. There in a bargain bin was just the beast, a bright red and pink clockwork lobster. When touched, it made just the right clatter, I'm going to do it later, and span around. The touch was light to set it off, and it had no rough edges to hurt anything. That night, Simon and Amanda spent an hour putting the lobster into the moth trap. Every time it touched the floor or an egg box, it would burst into life, spinning in circles. Simon grumbled that he was never going to get it to sit still, when suddenly he got it and somehow managed to set everything up with a quiet lobster. The next morning, the wren was on the grass looking a little wild-eyed and pecking absently at the little moths on the grass blades. It was not in the trap. The lobster was on its side, which might have meant a bit of a fight had taken place, but nobody was hurt, which was a big win. Well, some moths were hurt, but not nearly as many as had been getting hurt before the lobster was used. After that, Simon set the lobster every night and met the wren on the grass every morning. Other participants in this game of catch the moth from within the trap were less friendly. Some mornings, Simon would take the lid off the trap and find wasps or even hornets in the egg boxes. Where the moths were calm and dozy in the morning, the wasps and hornets really did not like being woken up, and many times Simon had several stings. He is very lucky, and even hornet stings don't make him ill. Most people would have given up the moths if they had got stung, but not Simon. Twice, a female moth left an unexpected gift behind in the shape of a cluster of eggs. Moths usually lay their eggs on a plant or plant stem that their caterpillars will then want to eat. When you are choosing between wood or cardboard, when you are trapped with no plants nearby, wood apparently wins. Both times, Simon got very excited and started to collect bramble branches to put into a glass dome where he was planning to look after everything that hatched. Both times he somehow knew what species had laid the eggs. Amanda was very surprised. They all looked white and pointy to her, with no difference each time. Bramble is a wonderful plant, even though you wouldn't think so, apart from at bramble picking time. For wildlife, it is food for all sorts of insects and their youngsters. Actually, there are 350 different brambles, but there aren't many people who can tell the difference. For moths, it is like an alternative to their normal food, and it's so common that it's easy to find. The caterpillars of the second lot of eggs hatched into teeny tiny little black fuzzy things. They ate fresh bramble leaves every day and grew bigger and bigger. Every 10 days or so they would stop eating, drop little pellets on the ground and look very itchy. Then there would be small fluffy skins on the bottom of the glass dome, and the caterpillars would look completely different. One time they would be black and orange with black spines. The next time they would have black and green stripes with yellow spots sprouting long black spines dotted in the green bands, as if they were wearing football kit with ever-changing strip. After 4 changes, they got very fidgety and started to roam pretty speedily around their little home, ignoring fresh food unless using it for gymnastics. Shortly after this, some fluffy pods started to appear. Simon got very excited. "They're starting to pupate," he said. "We must make sure they stay dry somewhere dark and safe." When all the caterpillars had gone into their silky, fluffy pods, Simon and Amanda took the glass dome into the shed and left the chrysalises on a dark shelf, left to themselves where 6 months later they would turn into moths. The time of the hatching was important. If they hatched in the shed unable to get out, then they could get caught in spiders' webs or beat themselves on the window glass. When the time was near, Simon went in every day to look to see if there were any signs of movement. Moths in chrysalises are like very scrumpled, unironed shirts, and when they come out they need a bit of time to spread out and make sure their wings straighten safely. One morning in March, he went to the shed and found 4 male emperor moths in the middle of wing straightening. He jumped up and down and rushed to the back door. "They've hatched! They've only gone and hatched!" he said. Like proud parents, Simon and Amanda went to check on their babies. Over the next 5 days, more males and then females came out and took to the wing. They are very beautiful moths. They all have eyes on their wings, to frighten owls, I put here, with underwings which are largely pink on the girls and largely orange on the boys. And there's a photograph in the book taken by Simon, which I hope you can see. So the eyes are actually to look like owls rather than frighten owls, but that was an error at the time of writing. And this is our little pal, who may or may not perform. But we couldn't get him to do it on the table. We did try, but he won't. So this year we have also been spending time in the garden for reasons we all know. And what we have been experiencing is some more lovely stories. Whether there are enough for another book, we don't know yet, but a robin has been, an adult robin this time, has been a source of entertainment, joy and comment. We have very little confidence that it is Freckles himself, because at the age of 7 that's quite elderly for even a feisty robin, but we are certain that he is a descendant, so we have christened him Robbie Freckleson in good Scandinavian mindset, and he has been collecting beakfuls of food for his wife or his chicks at various points across the spring and the early summer, and he's been collecting them and then sitting on Freckles' branch very often, or certainly in the little oak tree, and waiting and waiting, and occasionally giving a grumpy little bit of song until he gets a call that it's okay to get to the nest from her indoors that we have called Swimbo, she who must be obeyed. And then he darts across to the nest, gets the food, and then he's back collecting more beakfuls, backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, but waiting for the call when it's ready. And we have also had some lovely wrens nesting in the nest box outside the kitchen window. They have raised 5 baby beakies. The beakies are a story in here, and they fledged last week, so we are empty nesters at the moment. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us, and before I draw a line under tonight, some people may ask where it's possible to get copies of the book. So in order to answer that question, that's the information on there: www.tiliapublishinguk.co.uk, and also there is now an ebook on Amazon Kindle and Kindle Unlimited, and I would be delighted to sign any copies that anybody might want from us.